Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel about ADHD. I want to give you a little bit of background about me. So my name is Dr. Richard Wadsworth. I am a medical doctor and I also have ADHD. So I was diagnosed with ADHD after really struggling a lot all the way through middle school, elementary school, high school. Um, I have my story in a book that I wrote just right at the end of medical school called The Inventive Mind ADHD Learning Model. And today I want to talk about three books, okay? These are books that I've been working on. One of them is The Inventive Mind ADHD Learning Model. The other one is The 6 Parenting Tools, and the third one is The 9 Steps of Change. So first of all, The Inventive Mind ADHD Learning Model. This book is a book that I put together after I had figured out how to be successful in an academic environment with ADHD. So, I'll give you a little bit of my story. So, when I first started into school as a kid, I didn't know that I had ADHD, but I knew that I struggled. I had a hard time paying attention. I had a hard time passing tests. I really struggled in school a lot. And I felt stupid a lot. People would be taking a math test and I would be the last one done, and then I would turn it in, after everybody else had already left. I was going into my next period. I'd get it back, a few days later, and I'd have an F on it. And that would happen over and over and over again. And I felt like every time I get one of those Fs, it was like proof that I was stupid. And I felt that way for a lot of my life. And I wanted to be a doctor when I was a kid, and I figured, hey, there's no way that I'm going to be able to be a doctor. That's just not possible. I can't even get through high school and pass. And I did manage to get through high school, but I had really low grades, and a lot of my classes I had D's, and I was trying to. I wasn't. It's not that I was a bad kid. In fact, a lot of people I talked to thought that I had really good grades because I was a good kid. I didn't do a lot of the stuff that you would think, bad kids or kids that didn't care would do. I actually did care. I wanted good grades, and I tried to study. I have memories of sitting in front of my homework for hours staring at it, and near to tears because I couldn't get through a paragraph and have any information stick in my mind at all. So I went through a lot of pain and a lot of struggle, and I wasn't even really thinking to go to college because I was like, what's the point of going to college? And more people are just going to tell me that I'm stupid. So I didn't take the ACT or the SAT, and I just kind of said, forget it. This is not for me. Well, I ended up getting married, and my wife and my father-in-law had encouraged me to go to college, and so I went to college. And when I was a little older at this point, and I learned some techniques pretty quickly in college that really helped me to be successful. And when I applied these techniques, I started getting, for the first time in my life, really good grades. I was acing all of my tests for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh! And I didn't hardly even realize what was going on at the time. Was this some kind of fluke? What's going on? Why is this happening? I always had struggled with my grades. And over the course of being in college, I went on and was at over 100 credits, and I had a 3.96 GPA. And that was when things really started to click, and I started realizing, all right, I'm not dumb. It turns out that I just learn differently than other people. And I have started figuring out that actually the way that my mind works as a person with ADHD is almost the opposite of the way that other people's minds work. My mind doesn't pay attention to things until there's a problem, until I've already discovered that I cannot figure this out on my own. I have to basically fail before I can succeed. And then there's some tricks in there of how to trigger something called hyperfocus, and I figured out how to do that, and I took advantage of that through my career as a student, which you do call it a career, because goodness, they have you go to school for like over 10 years as a medical doctor. And going through all that, I found what works and what doesn't work. And I have come up with a system, and I call it the ADHD learning model, and I wrote a book about it. At the very end of my medical degree, I wrote this book the Inventive Mind ADHD learning model. And the reason why I call it the Inventive Mind is because I don't like telling people or even feeling like, okay, you have a deficiency, you know, because actually sometimes I can focus more than anybody else. I can hyper focus. The thing is just my mind works a little bit differently, and so instead of calling it a attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, you have a deficiency in a disorder, I like to call it a different brain type, and I categorize two different types of brains. One of them I call inventive minds, and we're more driven by novelty and exploration and problem solving and creation. And I go through all these different things of how our minds work in my book. And then the other side of this, the other type of brain I call replicative minds, which are very good at becoming masters of tasks because they replicate the same behaviors over and over and over again. Their minds are geared for that, for replicating the same, doing math problems over and over and over and over again. Their minds, the more they do it, they're able to keep going at it, and they can keep attention on it. And actually, people with inventive minds also have this capacity. Now, of course, there isn't really just two mind types. There's a spectrum, right? There are minds that are more drawn towards novelty and these kinds of things, and there are minds that are more drawn towards replication, and there's everything in between. Okay, so when a person is really, really far on this inventive mind spectrum of things, it can be very, very hard to engage in replication and mastery of things, and vice versa. You know, so I talk about all this, of course, in the book, but this book is specifically for students. So I tried to write it for about the age group of probably where a kid who is maybe 12 years old up through a college student could get a lot of good information out of this. I tried to write it open like that. So that's the first book I wanted to talk about, was the Inventive Mind ADHD Learning Model. There is an audio book available for that. There should be links to it. If you go to the top of the browser there should be a button you can press and get a link to that. And once in there, you can switch down to the audio version of that. The second book I wanted to talk about was more in relation to my experiences as a psychiatrist. I have found that there's a lot of parents out there that have kids with ADHD, and their kids are struggling, and understandably so. School is not designed for inventive minds. It's designed for replicative minds. Inventive minds are all about discovery and creating something and finding solutions and finding the new thing. And so we want to get up, we want to move around, we want to interact, we want to get our hands on things. And if you do that in school, you get punished. I mean, that kind of behavior is not allowed. I used to constantly be raising my hand, or I would be doing something else. But I can't just sit here in a classroom for hours and just have, my brain just doesn't work like that. I've got to be hands-on. I've got to be making something. And I can talk about how I managed to do that in school, and actually worked very, very well for me. I did very well in college. So, but anyway, the second book, the 6 parenting tools, the 6 tools of parenting, I found that a lot of times these parents are dealing with these kids, and the kids are struggling really bad. They're being labeled as bad kids at school because they're different. And the kids struggle. And yes, they are impulsive, and they are very hyperactive. They do get up and move around a lot, and they're very curious. And these are differences from normal kids, and this is why they're labeled with a deficiency and a disorder. But parents have no idea how to handle these kids and what to do about it. So I'm actually working on a book specifically for parenting kids with ADHD, but just parenting in general. I found that most parents that I've worked with don't have any tools. They don't have any tools in their tool belt to know, how do I work with these kids? How do I help my kid with the problems that they're having? So I have my minor in marriage and family studies and my bachelor's in psychology, and then a doctorate in medicine, and then experience in psychiatry. And I've read stacks of books on this subject, and I put together all the information that I can have on this subject, and I put it into the 6 parenting tools, 6 tools of parenting. And there should be a link there available on this video for you, and you can check that out. And hopefully that'll equip some of you parents with just an idea of where to start. Now, and I said I'm planning to make another book that specifically addresses kids with ADHD, and how to work maybe a little bit differently with them than with others, and a couple other kind of like pro tips with that. But this book will at least get you started. So I hope that's helpful for you. The last book on this series is actually kind of after the damage has already been done. So if you have ADHD and your self-esteem has been shot, and it's resulting now in depression and anxiety, and your life has just kind of gotten stuck and you can't get out of it, this book is to help people in that situation learn how they can make changes in their life and overcome being stuck. So hopefully this book will be helpful for you. So I broke it down basically into people's lives having these 9 formulas or 9 steps that I've gone through. So I call it the 9 steps of change. And basically I've read stacks and stacks of books on self-help and books on psychology and books on helping change your identity, self-identity, and how to generate happiness in your life and success in your life. And I've put all this information into a pretty simple set of formulas that work in a stepwise fashion. And then I've been making this available to whoever wants it. So there is also an audiobook available for this one. I do not have the audiobook finished yet for the 6 Tools of Parenting, but that will be coming up in the future. Also, I'm going to be doing working on a pilot program soon to help parents of kids with ADHD to know kind of what to do and how to help their kids. And that's something coming in the future, probably in the next year. And I'm also planning to put that other book out that I mentioned earlier too, specifically helping parents, parenting with kids with ADHD. So hopefully these things will be helpful for you. I'm excited to make these resources available to help my people, the people with ADHD. We can do it, guys. We just have to do things differently. Okay. Best of luck to you. Bye bye.